Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 299 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the second bit of podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she's the greatest hostess in the known universe. She wrote all sorts of mean things in this intro that I had to delete. She's wonderful. Aaron Collette! How you doing, Aaron?
Shut up, you love it.
I do love it. That's why I'm laughing.
I didn't have a great week. I'm getting out of it, hopefully, preferably. I'm very upset about a topic, and we're going to talk about it right as soon as we get done with you. So I'm just going to hand the baton to you and say, how are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing pretty darn good. I had a overall pretty good week. We spent the weekend up in New Hampshire, so that was nice. And I walked into a liquor store in New Hampshire because it's just a theme park. They're just theme parks. They're amazing. I love New Hampshire liquor stores. I'm a libertarian by nature, and as a general rule, frown upon anything that the government does. And New Hampshire goes, "Oh yeah? Watch this. We're gonna get rid of all sales tax and all income tax in the state, and we're just gonna sell beer and wine and under the by the state, and we're gonna make the prices great and the selection great. And we're not going to step on anybody's toes. Like, we're not going to sell beer. We're not going to sell chips. We're not going to sell snacks and all that. Those you have to buy at convenience stores. So we're not stepping on any of the convenience stores. You come in, you buy, if you want beer, if you want wine and you want liquor, you come here. Everybody else, you go across the street." And so, yeah, that was good times. And continuing on the vague blogging, I will say the family thing that we have been dealing with is going very, very well. So that's awesome. I'll tell you about it, Aaron, after we finish the show. Yeah, so it's got some good news today. Got something because I was away all weekend. I did like a bunch of interviews and things like that during the week. I had a pile of files on my recorder that needed to be edited, and I literally an hour before we started, I finished the last one and cleared the card. So that was also that's just a big weight off my back, because I always want to keep the raw file just in case something happens. It's the moment I go, it'll be fine, is the moment something horrible happens. And so yeah, it's been a good day, Aaron. It's been a good day. All right.
Great.
Let the storm clouds begin.
Yeah, it's not been a good week for a particular family in Florida. And this story broke on Friday. Trying to figure out if it was this Friday or last Friday. I suppose it really doesn't matter. But you may have heard... there we go. May 9th. And so that was Thursday. All right. You may have heard of Senior Airman Roger Fortson. And if you haven't, you're going to learn about him. So I'm going to preface this by talking about something else, and believe me, it's going to be relevant. Now, we didn't talk about it on this podcast, but y'all have likely heard by now about Acorn Cop. And Acorn Cop was a sheriff's deputy in Florida in Okaloosa County. For people who don't know, Okaloosa, it's in the Panhandle. It's basically, it's technically Florida, but it's essentially South Alabama. And it's next to Pensacola, if you know where that is. And so Acorn Cop was a sheriff's deputy who was prior military service, had served in the Gulf, and it has later come out, has some sort of PTSD. No shame to him on that. He arrested a suspect who was alleged to have a firearm. He arrested the suspect, put him in the car, and then at some point he heard a noise which he thought to be a gunshot. It was later determined to be an acorn falling from a tree and landing on a car. He interpreted this as a gunshot and for some reason fell to the ground claiming he was hit. I don't really know how he came to that conclusion. I'm just going to go with PTSD. And so he claimed he had been hit. He suspected that the suspect in the car was shooting at him somehow. I believe the suspect was handcuffed and had been searched. He proceeds to light up his cruiser, and his partner, who's also his supervisor, notices her partner shooting, and they also shoot at the back of their cruiser. And they empty a couple magazines that way. Miraculously, no one is hurt in all this. And so,
except for that poor guy in the back of the car's pants.
I know. It's like, on the one hand, okay, look, I'm very happy no one was wrongfully shot. On the other hand, I'm going, look, if they are unloading into the back of an unmoving car and they don't hit the guy, there's possibly something wrong with their firearms training. So, I mean, I give some side-eye, but, it worked out for the best. And lots of people were making jokes about this, and since no one was hurt, that's fine. And the police officer rightly resigned. I don't remember exactly what he said, but the underlying impression was, yeah, I've got PTSD. I'm too high-strung for a job where people shoot at me. I shouldn't be doing this. And okay, that was a good decision. Why do I bring all this up? Well, it's because last week there was another shooting incident in Okaloosa County by another member of the sheriff's department. So we've got a pattern going on. And this one is, it's dirty. And I want to specify it's not dirty in terms of premeditation, but it's dirty in terms of, I don't see how anyone who has any sort of reasonable grasp of the situation could blame the victim for this. So, here's the situation, and I'm very worked up about this. I brought this to Weer'd's attention, and for a while we were just typing heatedly at each other about how messed up this was.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the victim, because I want you to be absolutely certain this is not victim blaming here. So, Roger Fortson was a senior airman in the Air Force. Senior airman is an E4, and for people who know a little bit, the difference between senior airman and a sergeant is that senior airman is the Air Force equivalent of a specialist. He was 23 years old, so he was of legal age, and he was a member of a pretty elite unit. You may not have heard of them. Yeah, the 1st Special Operations Wing, which operates out of an airfield adjacent to Elgin Air Force Base. He was a gunner aboard an AC-130. And so this is a guy, an AC-130J Ghost Rider. So he brought fire support to people in the field. This is a guy who is squeaky clean, because people with criminal records, people with behavioral issues, people with substance abuse or domestic violence, they don't do this sort of thing. So, how did he get killed? Well, per the Bodycam footage, a deputy was dispatched to his apartment complex, and he was met by a woman who I assume runs the office. I wouldn't necessarily say she's the landlady, but she is the manager, perhaps. And she tells the deputy that there is a domestic disturbance going on at this particular apartment, and that there's a lot of yelling, and she says use of the B word. I mean, I'm not censoring that. It's literally what she says. So the deputy goes up on the elevator, goes up to the door. And again, this is a body cam that's recording audio and video. He goes up to the door. He listens at the door.
You can see him lean down towards the door as he's probably putting his ear very close to it.
Mm-hmm. Now, while I acknowledge there's a possibility that he could have heard something that the mic didn't pick up, if it's a domestic disturbance, it's gonna be recorded on the body cam. And I didn't hear anything. All right, he's been dispatched. He needs to investigate. That's fine. He pounds on the door and announces Sheriff's Department. And then he moves to the side. Now, Weer'd brought up the point, and I understand, and I grant this point, that a lot of officers don't want to stand in front of the door because that makes them a target. I get that. There needs to be some sort of training involved, some sort of workaround, because if you've got someone pounding on your door claiming to be police, and then you go and you look through the peephole and you don't see anyone, that would be suspicious to me. And I believe it was suspicious to the victim as well. And there was no answer, probably because Airman Fortson went to the door, looked through the peephole, didn't see anything, and then decided not to answer. So the deputy comes back, pounds on the door, announces himself, goes to the other side. The door opens. Now, I acknowledge that a body cam is not the same as an eye. It's not in exactly the same place, but it kind of seems like it's on his right side. And what's important is that after knocking at the door, the deputy moves to the left. So his left side is next to the wall, and he's looking at the door to his right. The door opens. We see the door open. We can't see the person. He announces, "Step back." He then, what's the technical term? It's not slicing the pie, but he breaks the edge of the door, as he comes around, and he sees Senior Airman Fortson. Now, Airman Fortson, rather understandably, after answering a door with someone pounding, but couldn't see that this person was a deputy, answers the door with a gun. Now, here's the important thing. His gun was pointed down, and the way he was holding the gun, he was holding it with the flat side on, so you could see the trigger, and I don't think his finger was on the trigger. I think his finger was indexed, just by the way he was holding it. Could be mistaken. But I want to point out, again, he's 23 years old. He can legally have a pistol. He was not on base housing. He was at a private apartment. He could own a pistol. And his other hand, his left hand, is held up, palm out, in that universal symbol of, hey, take it easy. So, you've got a sheriff's deputy who was hiding, comes around the corner, sees a man with a gun. The gun's not pointed at him. Here's what happens. The deputy draws his pistol, fires. They say 6 times. I only counted 5 shots, but it really doesn't matter. He fires a whole bunch of times. The video stops, but we can still hear the audio. He fires. Fortson falls to the ground, and then the deputy says, "Drop the gun." I mean, that's the punchline to a bad joke, as long as no one is hurt. But he literally shot someone because he scared himself, because he couldn't see the person opening the door from where he was. And he reacted and shot this man. The man didn't die immediately. And there's this whole other topic, which I'm not going to get into, about whether or not he delayed in rendering aid. But Airman Fortson died from this. And what you hear is bang, 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 drop the gun, and Fortson, as he's bleeding out, goes, "It's over there." In other words, he dropped it as a result of being shot. He didn't have it in his hand. This is dirty as all hell. Mm-hmm. About the best thing I can say about it is that it wasn't premeditated, and I don't believe it was racial. I didn't point this out. Airman Fortson was black, and the deputy appeared to be white. But nothing was said about that I could tell. I don't believe the person who called 911 said he was black. I think what happened was the deputy saw the gun, panicked, and massively overreacted. And so, why did I bring up Acorn Cop? Because this seems like there is a problem within the Okaloosa Sheriff's Department in terms of training, and their deputies are trigger happy, and this is bad. And there's a whole bunch of other things about this, which I'm sure Weer'd is going to touch on, but as I wrap up, the main thing I want to leave you all with, well, first of all, if you're in Okaloosa County, don't open the door unless you see a warrant, because keep yourself safe. But if you are answering the door armed, I would recommend that your gun not be obvious. Either keep it holstered or keep it behind your back.
My personal thing in this case, the door opens. What was it? It would open inward from what's this? As you're opening the door in there, it opened from right to left. If you're standing inside the apartment coming out. So in that case, if it was me, I would switch the gun to my left hand and open the door with my right hand and essentially blade my body to look outside. Number one, you're just cracking it open so you can slam it if it turns out like, no, that's not an officer or something's really messed up there. And then two, the door's there that if you try to close the door and they fight with you, the gun's right there. You can shoot. You can visualize where the person is and shoot them through the door. And that way also they don't know. And I'll tell you right now, actually, didn't even think about it. But while I was putting my daughter to bed, the doorbell rang. And so it was, almost 9:00 at night, and it's dark out, and the doorbell rang, and I'm not expecting anybody. So I grabbed a gun and went downstairs and looked out through the window. There was nobody outside and all that. Opened the door. Turned out it was an Amazon driver had delivered a package very, very late and actually was hands off to this person, rang the doorbell because it's late at night, your porch light's on, so you guys are probably up, and if you don't want this thing sitting all night long. Luckily we don't have a problem with porch pirates, but don't assume that. That was great, but it's one of those, like, if the doorbell rings at a very, very odd time, like I'm gonna bring a gun with me, and you see very much in departments where the chief is very respectful of the Second Amendment, openly training their officers. People are going to be concealed carrying here. You need to respect that. It's legal. It's allowed. Don't harass anybody just because they're carrying a gun. And furthermore, expect people when you come knocking at the door to show up with a gun. And but again, you don't. So long as you're not pointing it at somebody, it should be fine. That being said, this is now going on the thing of in the event that it's a really, really crappy cop, Aaron's right. You don't have to answer the door. And I would argue that you can holler back to the police officer, I'm calling 911. Call 911. Say there's somebody knocking at my door. Is that one of your people? Do you know what they want? And then you can figure it out. Okay, if it is the cops, then you can go, all right, go put the gun someplace, tuck it in he was in his kitchen was what that opened up to. Throw it in a kitchen cupboard, get it out of the way, get it so they're not see, then open the door, then talk to the police officer and see what's going on. But yeah, the whole idea of he yelled police, I just said police. Anybody can say that, and there is documented instances where criminals have yelled police in order to get people confused enough to give them an advantage. So don't do that. Plus there's also people that'll impersonate police officers and do all sorts of freaky deaky stuff. So yeah, this is, it's the same idea as if somebody calls up and says that there's a fraudulent charge on your credit card, say, thank you very much. Do you have what's your extension? And then hang up the phone and dial the number on the back of your credit card and call them up and say, all right, and dial the extension if you need to. But call the number on the back of your credit card. Somebody can call your house and fake your credit card's number, but they can't make it so that your phone can only call the scammer when you dial the credit card's number. So it's just trust but verify, and let the officer know so they don't start like kicking down your door, because that would only make things worse, because it's I don't know who you are, and now you're kicking my door down saying police.
So to wrap this up, or at least this particular part of it, there was no one else in the apartment. It was just Airman. I want to get his name right, and I keep forgetting it. I want to call it Fortson, but that's an author. It was just Airman Fortson. He was FaceTiming with his girlfriend. Now, I don't know what was going on. Maybe they were having an argument. If you're having an argument with your girlfriend and you're shouting at her and calling her a bitch, that's not a domestic disturbance. That's maybe disturbing the peace. But again, the deputy got to the door and didn't hear anything. So I don't know if this was a case of, SWAT wasn't called, but swatting, or if the person calling it in had confused it with a different unit. I don't know. This is going to go very badly for the department, because the family of Airman Fortson have retained the services of Benjamin Crump. In case you don't know that name, this is the same lawyer who represented the families of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. So this is going to be very, very messy, and if the Okaloosa Sheriff's Department is smart, they're going to jettison this guy and cooperate with the DA, because the sheriff, I don't remember his name, and honestly, I don't feel like giving him the press, he's up for re-election this year. And given the two incidents that I just described, I don't think he's going to win. I think he would just be throwing away time and money and effort. So, honestly, if he's smart, he'll just run out the clock on his service and leave alone. Because Crump is, after he's done with the wrongful death against the deputy, he's probably going to do a civil suit against the entire department.
Yeah, I think the plan is get this officer away for as much as he can get for him, and then use that as leverage on this officer's now in prison for X, Y, and Z, or pled guilty to X, Y, and Z, and this was all under the purview of this sheriff and his department. And there's also mentioned the Acorn cop, where they shot up their own cruiser with a handcuffed suspect in the back. And we need money, and they're going to get it.
Yeah. One final thing I want to point out is that, all right, as terrible as this is, and it is terrible, and I wish it didn't happen, but the little thread of silver lining is that this is such a clear-cut case of a dirty shoot to an impeccable victim that something is going to happen. In addition to the outrage, I have been doing some research on this, and his military unit is pissed. I don't claim a whole lot of experience with the military, but I grew up around the military. I know a certain amount of military speak, and I can tell when they're doing the written equivalent of talking through gritted teeth. And so while they very clearly aren't casting the blame at the sheriff's department or this particular deputy, I don't know that I could specifically point out it's this phrase right here, but the overall feeling I have, and I've linked a couple of articles, one from Air Force Times, read it and see for yourself. The overall feeling I have is that they're going, yes, it technically, we aren't accusing the deputy yet, but we have questions. And considering that the Air Force is part of the federal government, and he was a highly regarded member of a very effective unit, The complaints are going to go up to Washington, I would imagine. And Washington is probably going to then exert some force to see that this is done. So the question is, how much of this poop is going to roll downhill?
I think it goes without saying that this unit has AC-130s, and don't you dare think that it didn't cross their mind.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
AC-130, often mistaken for the fist of an angry god. They put a damn howitzer in a plane. I love those so much. That's one thing that's a guilty pleasure of mine is pour myself a nice stiff cocktail late at night and just watch AC-130 gunner cams. Yeah, they get some stuff done, and like that thing's so high up in the air they don't even know it's happening. The U.S. military, it's terrifying. Don't F with us.
Okay, so that's my rant on the subject. I don't know, Weird, if you have anything else to say about it.
I mean, you covered it wonderfully, and
okay.
Yeah, everything that I had to say, we talked about and gone through, and yeah, this is going to be go through it, and this sheriff is likely an idiot. I found the press conference where he unveiled the badge cam footage, and it was just CYA nonsense. And so I suspect he probably will attempt to run for re-election. This is very similar to Sheriff Israel. What was the guy that was in charge of the absolute idiots that did nothing in Parkland? Yeah, I know he arrogantly ran for re-election, and the people went, "No, you're awful." So yeah, this. Well, actually, how close is this to you in Florida? It's gigantic. So how close is this to you, Aaron?
Oh, it's very far.
Okay, so you're probably further. You probably might see some of the juicy stuff, but you're not going to see you're not going to be driving around running errands and have the radio on and a commercial break come through and some negative ad against this guy pops up.
Oh no, not at all. I didn't measure the distance or the amount of time, but yeah, I'm midway down the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And this is in the Panhandle on the Gulf Coast. Oh,
okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably 600 miles if it's an inch.
It's I would say it's between 4 and 8 hours worth of driving. It's quite a ways. There's a reason that I said it was essentially South Alabama as opposed to Florida, because it's closer to Mobile than any of the other cities in Florida you may have heard of, like Jacksonville.
But either way, this sheriff's race, if he decides to run, will be an absolute bloodbath, and I might keep an eye on it because I don't have the thing where I like to watch people throw balls around. I guess that's a thing that people enjoy to do. But boy, I love watching just a nasty campaign fight. So speaking of nasty campaign. So New York is continuing to be New York, and they have proposed a law that will ban. The headline is that they're trying to ban Glocks, but it goes way deeper than this. They have a ban that would propose to ban guns that can be easily converted to machine guns. And Aaron and I were talking just before this of this is banning guns. This is banning semi-autos.
Well, perhaps not hammer-fired guns like 1911s, but definitely striker-fired guns.
For sure, it's going to ban. Yeah, if your gun is striker-fired and it's got one of those little back plates on it, yeah, it's this gun will be affected by that New York ban. Though in theory, I was telling Aaron, I haven't looked into what the guts of a Beretta 93R looks like, or I know there's a handful of full auto 1911s out there, but what would it take to convert a hammer fired gun into a full auto? It could be extremely easy because If you look at guns like that's the magic of what an auto sear on an AR-15 does. Is all it does is it simply holds down the disconnector so that the hammer can be tripped and fall again, and so it might be as simple as that. It might be more complicated. I don't know. I do know that just as a general rule, full auto guns are way easier to make than semi-auto ones.
First of all, I think we've all seen this joke, so all I need to do is give the punchline. New York's not here for the hunting, is it?
No.
Second, what I desperately want Glock to do, I want Glock to pull a Ronnie Barrett. For people who don't know what I mean, I don't remember how many years ago it was, but California made a big deal about outlawing 50 caliber rifles because they could be used for terrorist purposes. I think they said something like shooting down planes. And Ronnie Barrett actually, I don't even know the name of the company. I assume it's like Barrett Rifle Company or whatever.
Barrett Firearms.
But you all know what a 50 caliber Barrett is. It's so ubiquitous. And so he wrote a letter to California, and it essentially said, because you have decided to ban my gun, I'm canceling all orders you have placed. If you send a firearm into me for repair, you're not getting it back. If you are going to criminalize my guns, I'm not going to do business with you ever. Have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I desperately hope that's what Glock does, because I did a little bit of digging, and New York State troopers are issued the Glock 21 as their service pistol, and New York City cops, it's kind of vague, but I believe that the Glock 19 is one of the acceptable guns.
New York City, they have a series of choices, and then they're given a stipend to buy a service gun, and so they choose what they want. But I will note that it is literally NYPD that were the people that created the New York Glock trigger, and there is, I remember hearing some people. I don't have a Glock. I haven't messed around with it, but I have heard like there's like a sweet spot where you put the competition trigger spring into a Glock, but also throw in the New York trigger return spring, and that allows the trigger pull to be very, very smooth and very, very like isometric and have a good positive reset, but not be so light as some of these target trigger guns where it's one of those like the gun doesn't have a safety. It's not safe to carry with a trigger that light. But you could buy like New York trigger springs, and that is for NYPD's requirement of having like a 12 or 15 pound Glock trigger pull.
So, yeah, what I hope that they do is, first of all, they just say, okay, we're not selling to you, we're not servicing any of your guns because you've singled us out. And second, I hope there is a big lawsuit. I'm pretty sure there will be. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that SAF and FPC and GOA and others are just salivating at the thought, because the Glock pistol in whatever caliber is so ubiquitous. I mean, for a while there, and I want to say like the 90s, and maybe to this day, I don't know, it was the default sidearm of all police officers in the country. There is no other pistol that I can think of that falls under common use more than this particular pistol. And yes, as Oddball says, common use shouldn't be the end-all be-all, but it is a good first stop. Mm-hmm. And so this is absolutely under common use. And then, as you pointed out, just because Glock is in the headline doesn't mean that it's only them. They're going after all the striker-fired ones. I really wish they would at least have the honesty to say, we don't like semi-auto, we want you to have revolvers, because that would at least be morally honest. And so I expect there's going to be a massive, massive lawsuit. And New York is going to lose, and it's going to lose big. The only question is how long it's going to take to get through the courts, because unfortunately the legal process is slow.
Yeah, and the other angle too is that, again, NYSERPA v. Bruin, that literally Supreme Court decision was for the state of New York, and they did not comply. So the question is, if they do end up passing this law, which they have the votes to do it for sure. The question is, are they going to pull it because they hear us talking? Probably not, because it's, again, New York. They don't care. But once the courts come through, what's going to go on? But again, as you said, so the Barrett action is Ronnie Barrett. The Barrett Firearms Company made, obviously, the 50 BMG rifles. Obviously, that's what put them on the map at the time of this regulation in California, which was 2004. So it was 20 years ago.
Oh my God! It doesn't feel that long ago. We're old.
Yeah, we definitely are. But at that time, Barrett was also making AR-15s. So there was and so there were some police issued ARs that were out there in the wild, where he's just like, yep, if you got them, hold on to them. If they break, you got to fix them, because I'm not doing it, and I'm not selling you any more. But it was one of those, let's be honest, when you think Barrett Firearms, you're not thinking about their ARs. And so it was kind of a minimal impact. It was definitely a very, very good move, and we appreciate Ronnie Barrett for what he did, and I that's why I was excited to see that he is still on the board of directors of the NRA, because he is definitely the type of Second Amendment people that we need. But it wasn't that big. Glock is huge. Glock is absolutely huge. And so if you took Glocks away, the fact that you can't buy Glocks new in Massachusetts because of the handgun safety roster, but despite the fact that the cops in many, many towns have Glocks on them, that's just the way it rolls. And again, the whole New York thing, there's a ton of New York departments that are carrying Glocks as their sidearm. If Glock USA just said, screw you guys, you're not getting any more, you're not getting any parts, you're not getting any service, that would be devastating. So Aaron, I hope that's right, because that would certainly turn some heads.
Well, there is something that happened in the news, and it's actually good news, and it turned my head, and I didn't think I'd live to see the day. So weird. Apparently, the ATF has seen some sense or been worn down, and they have allowed some 4,000 machine guns to be transferable. What the heck?
Yeah, this was the Northern District of Texas court. This person sued. They essentially submitted a firearm for registry with the NFA. I didn't quite get the technicalities of exactly where it went through, but essentially these firearms were in believe police hands at the time of the Hughes Amendment, and they have been deemed now by the courts as eligible for registration with the NFA. So that actually means that a whole bunch of guns, a bunch of them being MP5s, which I will say highly collectible, highly desirable machine guns, are going into the NFA registry, which is amazing, because we'll be talking about it a bit later on in the show. Spoiler alert! But the registry's been closed for since 1986. So yeah, this is amazing. And then furthermore, I've actually got a link of Ian talking about this, but also evidently the ATF wait times have gotten really, really low if you're using the electronic forms and the electronic money transfer. you can get your NFA stamp very, very quickly, like weeks, which is kind of amazing. And honestly, how it should have been all along, because let's face it, there's, what more is there? If the National Instant Background Check System isn't doing as thorough a job as what the ATF does when you're applying for a tax stamp, why not? All right, and one last thing that I wanted to make note of was, I heard this and I'm like, oh yeah, we got to talk about this one. Is that in 2023? I'm trying to remember if I think we did mention it, at least in passing, on the podcast. The Washington Post published a series on the AR-15, and it was just anti-gun propaganda. It was just fear-mongering and just standard anti-gun talking points on why we need to ban the AR-15. And it turns out that one won a Pulitzer Prize. I forget what the let's see. It wasn't the like investigative journalism one, but it was still, they won a Pulitzer for this pile of anti-gun trash. And really, that's all I wanted to say about that. Was they're giving themselves awards for crappy anti-gun propaganda, but furthermore, they're giving themselves awards for, and this is again allegedly, I don't have the direct proof on it. I would love to, because supposedly it's there, but the shooter at the Covenant Elementary School in Tennessee allegedly was inspired by this article to bring an AR pistol along. That this whole discussion, because one of the things that this talked about was the fact that AR pistols could be equipped with pistol braces and therefore essentially be short-barreled rifles, and that would be an excellent choice for a spree killer. And I will note that the killer there appeared to minimally use the AR and was essentially using a sub 2000 for the majority of at least the majority of the shooting that was filmed. And so, yeah, this person was inspired by this to maybe not necessarily to carry out their shooting, because it clearly they already had the gun that they wanted to do the shooting, but they went out and bought an AR-15 specifically to bring with them, and this, I think this was in the leaked pages of the Shooter's Manifesto, that they were wanting to push for gun control. Do you remember off the top of your head, Aaron?
I do not.
Well, either
but
way.
I can tell you, because while you were talking, I do the research. And so this Pulitzer Prize was for national reporting. And for people who think that winning the Pulitzer, or Pulitzer, I don't know exactly how you say that vowel, it's not just an award. It comes with a monetary prize of $15,000. So they aren't just doing this for the propaganda, but they are enriching themselves while so doing.
So, yeah, good on you guys. Congratulations. Propaganda, it's crap. And, yeah, Pulitzer Prize, like most awards, is now something that you can just happily ignore.
Well, I don't know if... You make it sound like this is a recent thing, and it's not. As the article points out, the Pulitzer Prize has been awarded for some pretty bad journalism over the years, referencing the 1932 Pulitzer Prize awarded to Walter Duranty and his analysis of the Soviet Union under Stalin.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and the New York Times correspondents have since discredited and disavowed his coverage. So as the article writer points out, and this is him speculating, he's saying the Pulitzer people bought this thesis, they believed it because they wanted it to be true and it fit with their politics. And so he contends that the same is case with the Washington Post and their firearms coverage. And while I don't know if it's true, it sounds plausible.
And just because I like to both kick Michael Moore and the Academy of Motion Pictures down the stairs, I will note that it was 22 years ago that Bowling for Columbine won Best Documentary. And of course, the big gag is that it's Best Documentary, but Bowling for Columbine was essentially a work of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It was heavily edited. A lot of the scenes were scripted and orchestrated. Most of the things that happen in that are misleading and not true. And much of the accounts of the killers and the events of the shooting were also not true. So, yeah, Michael Moore's a prick. And so is the Academy of Motion Pictures. But Aaron, do you know who's not a prick?
I mean, with that lead in, normally I would go with our listeners.
I know,
and begin the wrap
I realize that, but but our listeners are not, and we'll thank you later. It's not time yet. But who else is not a prick?
So from prick to FOPA, David is here to talk about the origin of the Hughes Amendment and why we can't own machine guns anymore.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. In a previous segment, I discussed the Gun Control Act of 1968. In this segment, I'd like to discuss the often misunderstood and much maligned modification to that law, the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986, more commonly known as FOPA. One of the main stated goals of the Firearm Owners Protection Act was to unify and simplify legal transportation of firearms by individuals. Prior to this law, people could be, and far too frequently were, hassled and harassed by law enforcement while transiting a more restrictive state on the way between two more liberal states. The Firearm Owners Protection Act was intended to put a stop to that behavior. Unfortunately, some of the most restrictive states, such as New York and Maryland to name just two, regularly ignore this law. The pertinent portion of the law, 18 U.S. Code 926A regarding interstate transportation of firearms, reads as follows. Notwithstanding any other provision of any law or any rule or regulation of a state or any political subdivision thereof, any person who is not otherwise prohibited by this chapter from transporting, shipping, or receiving a firearm shall be entitled to transport a firearm for any lawful purposes from any place where he may lawfully possess and carry such firearm to any other place where he may lawfully possess and carry such firearm if, during such transportation, the firearm is unloaded and neither the firearm nor any ammunition being transported is readily accessible or is directly accessible from the passenger compartment of such transporting vehicle, provided that in the case of a vehicle without a compartment separate from the driver's compartment, the firearm or ammunition shall be contained in a locked container other than the glove compartment or console. In addition to the safe passage provision, the Firearm Owners Protection Act also made a number of other changes to federal law. Many of them minor edits, such as changing the word and to or and vice versa. There were also more significant changes, such as clarifications to the categories of prohibited persons. The Gun Control Act of 1968 initially created this list, but many people felt it left too much discretion in the hands of judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement. While there have been other changes since 1986, the yes-no questions on the Form 4473, used when purchasing a firearm from an FFL, makes up the current list. Among the other changes made by this law were those having to do with record-keeping requirements for both dealers and collectors, allowing interstate sale of rifles and shotguns, banning the federal government from creating a registry of firearms, firearms owners, or firearms transactions, and introducing the requirement for a 90-day public comment period for any additional proposed regulations. There was one more major change to the law in FOPA 86. As might be expected, this proposed bill was not very popular with the gun prohibitionists. As such, they tried a number of things to derail it, including a variety of amendments, most of which were intended as poison pills. The most notorious of these is known as the Hughes Amendment for Representative William Hughes of New Jersey. While Representative Hughes sponsored several amendments to the law, he's best known for Amendment 777. This closed the machine gun registry created by the 1934 National Firearms Act, preventing any additional machine guns from being added to that registry for sale to private individuals. This created a limited and slowly shrinking supply of machine guns, set against an ever-increasing demand. The result was an unsurprising change in prices of available machine guns. They skyrocketed. Prior to the passage of FOPA, fully automatic firearm prices had increased slowly but steadily over the years. One cause for this was the $200 tax stamp required by the National Firearms Act of 1934 for every transfer. Most people would want to recoup that cost, which would bump up the price with each sale. However, that was nothing compared to the increase following passage of the law burdened by the Hughes Amendment. For example, a full-auto M16 prior to Hughes sold for not much more than a semi-automatic AR-15. Today, the lowest price I found in a quick web search was $30,000 for a registered full-auto M16. Listings at $40,000, $50,000, and even $60,000 weren't uncommon. The Hughes Amendment also had a chilling effect on development of fully automatic firearms, as very few manufacturers would invest in this type of research for little to no return. Unless they already had a government contract, of course. Clearly, there's considerable emotion involved with this amendment. However, it's not just due to its content, but also the method of passage. Unlike most of the other amendments, which passed or failed on roll call votes, the Hughes Amendment was passed by a voice vote presided over by Representative Charles Rangel of New York. The difference between these methods, put simply, is accountability. In a roll call vote, the yeas and nays are recorded in the congressional record. However, with a voice vote, they're usually not. Even at the time of passage, there was talk of impropriety regarding the voice vote. Unfortunately, nothing came of these concerns, and the amendment was added to the bill, which was then sent to President Ronald Reagan for his signature. As submitted, President Reagan was reluctant to sign the bill with, among others, the Hughes Amendment attached. However, his advisors assured him the amendment wouldn't survive Supreme Court scrutiny, and a challenge to the Hughes Amendment on constitutional grounds would see its end. Yet here we are, 38 years later. Hughes is still the law of the land, and the machine gun registry is still closed. As far as I know, the last Supreme Court case challenging elements of the NFA is still Miller. Are we better off having the Firearm Owners Protection Act even with Hughes? Overall, I would say yes. However, there's much work to be done to dismantle bad gun laws both at the local and national levels. The Supreme Court decision in NYSERPA v. Bruin in June of 2022 gave us a much-needed legal boost, but we're fighting an uphill battle against both prohibitionist legislators and maliciously misinformed public opinion. There's a lot we can do at the grassroots level. Number one is education. Organizations like Operation Blazing Sword Pink Pistols are always looking for volunteers, not only as instructors, but possibly more importantly, also for community outreach. If we work together, we can accomplish great things.
The Constitution does not say that government shall decree the right to keep and bear arms. The Constitution says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I get them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So first of all, listeners, don't at me. I know that you can technically own a machine gun, but it's such an expense and jumping through hoops. It's basically out of the reach of all of us peons. So that's what I meant. Okay, but it seems like what with all these illegal Glock switches and so on, it seems like everyone except the law-abiding have machine guns. All the criminals sure seem to. So for self-defense, why can't we?
Yeah, I mean it's. Yeah, we just really need to do away the whole NFA. That's a way to solve this all. I mean, it's not really accomplishing a whole lot. And
it's bringing in money to the ATF. That's what it's accomplishing.
Well, there's another thing we can get rid of. If we fire them all, we don't have to pay them.
Jerry Purnell's Iron Law of Bureaucracy. On a long enough timeline, every organization, no matter how ideal and pure the purpose at first, eventually morphs into its primary purpose being furthering the existence of that organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I gotta say, I'm generally one of those, I'm a FOPA apologist. I think it's a really great law. I've cited it frequently with, especially when the Rise of the Moors attack or standoff happened here in Massachusetts. I was noting the fact that they clearly were aware of the Firearms Owners Protection Act, but didn't actually read it or read it well, because everything they were doing seemed like they were citing it but not following it. It was dumb because they had loaded guns on their bodies, not locked up in the back of the car. And if they did, they probably would have been fine, because again, the Massachusetts is actually one of the few anti-gun states that really respects it. But overall, as a general rule, the places that you really need it, like, driving from the northern United States to the southern United States, you got to pass through New York. Yeah, if you get caught in New York, they're not going to respect it. New Jersey's not going to respect it. And then heard a million horror stories of people who got a flight diverted to O'Hare because of bad weather. And so suddenly now you're in Chicago and your checked luggage comes out and there's a gun, and now you're in big trouble. So yeah, there's a lot of places that don't respect it, and you need it there. And there's most places, yeah, just have the gun. You could still carry from one state to another, and that nobody cares. And and the Firearms Owner Protection Act doesn't matter in like Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it mostly just bans new machine guns, which sucks because I want a VZ61 so bad.
Why did you say that so quickly?
Because I want one so bad. So bad. Oh my God, I love that freakish little gun.
Oh, okay, the little scorpion.
The little scorpion, that's right. And specifically, I don't want the pistol. The pistol's dumb. Like it just needs to be the exact right way. It needs to have the shoulder stock, it needs to have the short barrel, and it needs to go burp. And it needs to just spray the brass like straight up in the air into low Earth orbit. And we poking holes in the solar panels of the ISS. Oh, they're so cool. They're so cool. They're so stupid, and I want one. I want multiple. I want one in 32. I want one in 9x18.
Okay.
Look at that Forgotten Weapons. Did you see the one Forgotten Weapons where Ian got a hold of a scorpion?
I have not.
And he was shooting it with a shoulder stock, and he goes, "All right, now we're doing the stupid thing. I'm going to shoot it without the shoulder stock." And he fires it full auto without the shoulder stock, and you could tell like ready for like the time when he was shooting the VP70 full auto, and he's just like, yeah, I got a couple of them on the target, but most of them no. And but yeah, shooting it was actually, that wasn't that bad. It's one of those like, oh, that's all I wanted. I wanted even more. We need to get rid of the NFA. We need to get rid of the NFA.
I would love that. The problem is that Operation Blazing Sword doesn't have that kind of money. But if someone can bring a challenge, oh my God, we're going to sign on as Amici on that case. So please do.
Please do.
Let me know.
All right. Let's get away from this. Let's not get depressed. Let's go to the uplifting thing. This blew my mind. I never have I been so surprised by an interview. I thought I knew everything about Walk the Talk America, and I just wanted to have them on and to talk about it. So I contacted Michael Sodini, and we sat down and had a great time. But I think you'll be amazed too at all the amazing things they do. So I am absolutely pleased to welcome to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Michael Sodini, who is the president and founder of Walk the Talk America. How you doing, Michael?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. And I mean, this is something that has been a long time coming. It's been said a bunch of times. You got to interview this guy. You got to reach out to you. And I apologize for not reaching out sooner. Also, I am also reaching out at the time of us recording, the day after you guys had a huge fundraiser. We could talk about that if you'd like. But the big thing I want to do is just get you to talk about your organization and what it does.
Sure. Yeah. And timing's everything, right? But we're going to have plenty of fundraisers in the future. So talking about fundraising is always important. But let me tell you a little something about Walk the Talk America. I started this organization in 2018. I consider myself, or I am, a third generation firearms industry professional. And I got my job through nepotism. I've said that before. Going into the firearms industry, though, I was not a gun person. I did not grow up with the family that brought me to work for them. Does that make sense? Like, I was on one side of the country and that company was on the other side. So I didn't grow up with the typical firearms family experience. I didn't go hunting. Where I grew up, the only people that had firearms were either cops, wannabe gangsters, or your neighborhood pharmacists, right? Like, if guns were not necessarily, I grew up in the Bay Area. Guns were not necessarily introduced to me in a healthy manner. But it really worked to my advantage, because when I got into the industry in 98, I didn't really have any biases or anything like that. I didn't have anything against guns. But I got to kind of just witness and understand how important the Constitution is and everything like that to being around gun people. One of the things I noticed, and the president of my company at the time, Eagle Imports, we noticed, is that suicide was a huge issue amongst the gun community, especially with people that we hold near and dear to our hearts, like combat vets and active duty military. And we used to talk about it because every year it seemed like there was one less person at SHOT Show that we used to hang out with or we knew. And we always thought it was kind of interesting that negative outcomes of firearms weren't really addressed. It was always kind of like us versus everybody else in the world. And, it was kind of a shame. And I always wanted to do something, didn't really know what that was, or didn't know how we could help as the gun industry. And then in 2009, the president of my company and one of my dear friends took his own life with one of our firearms. And that was just a weird, surreal moment, because you never expect the person that you're talking about these things with to actually do that, right? A, and then B, his funeral was like a who's who of the firearms industry. And once we put him in the ground, we just kept moving as a whole. There was no blogs about it, no articles. And, it's just one of those things where, once again, I felt like, suicide is an issue. Negative outcomes are an issue, but we kind of just blow over them because we don't want them used against us or be weaponized against us, which completely makes sense for every gun person out there that's listening to this right now. They're like, yeah, that's the stuff that gets used against us.
Well, actually, if I may interrupt real quick, I will say that, it absolutely is. I mean, I don't know what the current numbers are. I know the pandemic had a huge shakeup in the suicide numbers, unfortunately. But it's generally roughly 60% of the gun deaths in America historically have been suicides, and that number of deaths per firearm is always one of the primary tools used against us for, we need to have more gun control. Look at all these people that are dying every year. And I would argue that the people that are on the other side of the chart, the gun prohibitionist movement, are absolutely just as much avoiding the issue, because so much of the gun control issues are crime control, even though they're using suicide to pad the numbers, and they don't have outreach. You'll hear stories talking about suicide numbers and things like that in that. They'll actually admit, yes, huge portion of the gun deaths in America are suicides, but then they won't do anything with it. So I've got to say, this is another reason why I'm having you on, is the fact that it was really an unmet resource. Everybody was avoiding it. And I think that it's really the responsible thing for us to say, hey, suicide is a major factor and we should really do something about it.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, you just said something that was really interesting, talking about like they don't do anything about it. And that was, cut to 2018. I'm at a random dinner with my national sales manager at the time. And I used to own a company called Eagle Imports, which imported Bursa and Graham Power and Metro Arms into the United States. And we had this random stranger at dinner, and she was basically saying like, hey, how does this whole like mass shooting thing work, or what happens during a mass shooting? And they said, everybody blames us. We blame mental health, and then nothing ever happens. And her question to me after that, the follow-up question was something that sparked this whole movement. And I call it a movement now, because at the back then, I feel like mental health and firearms are mutually exclusive in all of our minds.
Mm-hmm.
But she asked, if you can't work with the mental health people on the things you disagree on, which is like restriction, right? All those things, like how do you work with the mental health community on the things you can agree upon? Because there's got to be things you can agree upon, like to get people help. And that question changed my life, right? So that was the whole thing in the beginning, and you're going to appreciate this. I thought I could just go raise money and hand it to the mental health community for their solutions, right? I was super naive.
You hear me laughing. That is another just major just void in our society that needs so much work, and there's almost no effort being done, is the mental health community.
Exactly. And the way that I was looking at it, because I was like, okay, what's another model I can look at? And I was like, big pharma. Everybody hates big pharma, right? And I was like, but yet they donate a ton of money to mental health. So like anytime you went to like a mental health conference or anything like that, you see all the signs for big pharma as sponsors. And I was like, okay, what would make the gun industry could do the same thing? Like we could just hand money to them, and then we'll buy our way into peace and being the good guy. I had no idea that they didn't really have the answers. I just thought they had the answers. We don't work together. Hence, one of the worst days of my life was figuring that out, right? Because I had gotten a bunch of people in the firearms industry excited about the possibility of what Walk the Talk America really do. And I remember having a board meeting trying to explain to everybody, like, all the things they talk about, the resources, the outreach, all that stuff is very vanilla and common. Like there's nothing exciting there. And I remember one of my board members stood up and was like, anybody can give money to mental health. Like we're from the gun industry. How can we be different? So it forced me to kind of look inside the gun industry and say, okay, what can I cherry pick from them that makes sense? And earlier I said, this has become a movement. I really do see it as a movement. It's a cultural shift inside the firearms industry, because now cut to, 2024, firearms owners are some of the most vocal groups about, keeping on top of your mental health and, talking about suicide prevention. And, I love where this is going. Because back in 2018, you just, like I said, you didn't talk about it. I make this joke. I always age myself. I'm always like, talking about suicide or negative outcomes of firearms in the firearms industry was like the movie Twister with the tornado, like when they start talking about the F5, right? And then they're sitting around the table and they're like, nobody ever talks about an F5. Like that's how it was. But now it's like we have a spot at the table. Like I work with the government in terms of working with the VA and the DOD. And it's been really interesting to get the perspective from gun owners, which never was there in the past. So it's exciting to see. But, I remember the first thing that I did was I started putting free and anonymous mental health screenings inside the boxes of my own firearms. And why that's important, a lot of it was kind of testing the water to see how the gun industry would react to that. I didn't know if I was going to get in trouble. I didn't know if I was going to piss off customers where they would call me. And it was the complete opposite. What we were getting was people were calling, hey, I just bought this Bursa and I saw that you have free and anonymous mental health screening. Thank you for doing something. I really appreciate that. So to sum it up, I really feel like the firearms industry always wanted to help, but just didn't know how, right? Like we were like wounded ducks, because as you know, just because you like firearms or you're pro firearm, people will judge you. And how it's hard when people call you names like baby killers or, blood money. You stand on people's graves for money. Like you kind of go like, well, how can I even help in this? Like, how can I push forward? And I feel like we kind of showed everybody that you can do something about it. We can actually be the leaders in this space and dominate it, right? Like we have the firearms trainers, we have the firearms shops, we have the manufacturers, we have all the avenues And if we just come up with the great programs and get them in the hands of our customers and our people, we can really lead the way in this space. It sounds so goofy, but I like it to compare it to what the alcohol industry did with DUIs, right? Because nobody blames Johnny Walker when somebody gets behind the wheel and takes out a family of 4. Like, they don't. They get a pass, right? And I feel like it's because of what the alcohol industry did to get ahead of the DUIs, whereas like the tobacco industry did the complete opposite. And, you know, like I said, the firearm is a tool. We all know that. And I'm preaching to the choir with this audience. But it doesn't mean that we can't step up and say like, yeah, we're on it. Like, we're way ahead of you. Because like you said earlier, they don't have the answer.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the Second Amendment issues, is because it's by far, I mean, it's kind of shameful. I'm here in Massachusetts under just horrendous amounts of gun control, and you said you're from the Bay Area, so you know exactly what I'm talking.
And I'm originally from New Jersey, so I.
Oh God, yeah. So yeah, we're intimately familiar with with how deep gun control is in our culture. But yet we also know that, hey, constitutional carries sweeping the nation, and look, violent crime's going down. We repealed the assault weapons ban in 2004, and look, violent crime went down. It's the laws that we're going for it's not a question of, do you want guns or do you want safety? It's, would you like guns and safety, or would you like less freedom and less safety? And furthermore, as you note, the gun control people are the people that are always talk about, oh, we need to have mandatory training, we need to have licenses for this sort of stuff and all that. Well, when you pass that legislation, 9 times out of 10, when I got my Massachusetts permit, I was required to take a training course, and what's my training certificate say? NRA on it. And then furthermore, everyone talks about, how, the tragedy of suicide and how prevalent it is. And it is intimately connected with the gun industry, and the fact that 50% of suicides in America are by firearms, roughly. And yet we're the only ones doing anything about it, which is both sad, because I don't even want to get into that, but it's sad that we are diving so deep into it, but it's also wonderful because you're doing stuff for good.
I appreciate that. And it is, I try to look at the world as positive as I can. I try to think that most people are just misinformed, right? Because I go into a lot of spaces that people have told me, like, I can't believe you go and talk to those people. And I'm like, a lot of them are just ignorant when it comes to firearms. It's not that they've heard the talking points. I feel like the firearms industry and firearms owners at times, because we are that wounded duck, or we're the ones that people really don't listen to, because what do we go up against, right? We go up against death and tragedy. Like, it's a hard argument to make, like, slow down, let's let everybody calm down. Let's not be emotional. But, when you're going into a room and most of the people have only heard the echo chamber talking points, and you can come forward with solutions, right? Instead of just like the whole pry from my cold dead hands. Now I need that person, right? That I love my staunch, like, pry from my cold dead hands, Second Amendment, guy or girl to the right or left of me. But at that same time, yeah, that's what they expect us to do, right? They expect us to fall back on that argument. So what I love is when I walk into a room full of anti-gunners, or people who are just gun ignorant, or people, who just are neutral but don't want to see people die by firearms, or they want to reduce negative outcomes. My whole thing is I'm going to blow their mind with all the things that we do in the industry. I'm going to bring those things to light, because they don't know that. They don't know it exists. They're not going to take the time to learn. They're not going to take the time to find out that the Rugers and the Arms Corps are putting free and anonymous mental health screenings in the boxes of their guns and on the side of their ammo packages, right? So once you do that, the defenses come down. They basically are like, okay, this is totally different than the typical rhetoric that comes with these arguments. And I feel like that gives me the opportunity to educate them as well, right? Like, I'll give you a prime example of that. I got invited to speak at the Aspen Institute of Health. And when I went there, I got several warnings from the people that run that event. And they were like, listen, this is a very anti-gun crowd. And last year we brought up the subject of guns and it went really bad. And, I was like, we'll be fine. Sometimes I'm better in front of that crowd than I am my own crowd, because my own crowd gets defensive really fast, right? Like they hear guns and mental health and they're like, stop blaming the guns. And I got to be like, wait, I'm on your team. But when I went there, the panel that I was on was bragging about red flag laws and how many lives they save. And, when it came to me and my turn, I was like, well, I live in a different world than the rest of the panel does. I live in a world where red flag laws actually get people killed. And I was like, and I know this is going to freak everybody out in the room, but let me tell you how. Let me tell you why, right? And then I explained to everybody, if I had $1 for every person that called or emailed Walk the Talk America and said, I want to get help, but I refuse to get help in my state because of a red flag law, what do I do? I was like, I wouldn't have to ask you for money. And it was crazy because after that panel, there were so many people that came up to me the next couple of days that, I was walking around the campuses and or the whole campus and going to all the different events. And they were like, hey man, you're the gun guy. I saw you the other day that, I hate guns still. And I'm not sure I'm changing my stance, but you gave me something to think about. Right. And I know the only reason that I was able to give them something to think about is because I came to that thing with solutions that they never thought existed, or they were probably like, wow, the gun guy's up there doing way more than the other people on the panel for suicide prevention or, reducing negative outcomes.
I mean, that's awesome to hear. And so let's close up. We've talked a lot about Walk the Talk, but we haven't talked about what it does. So tell me what services and features does your group offer?
Man, it's such a good question at this point, because if people ask me right now, what's the most important thing Walk the Talk America does? We struggle with that answer now because we do a lot, right? So just for the average gun owner, we provide them with mental health resources and access to information and education, and many times clinicians who are pro-gun, basically demystifying the counseling process for gun owners. The biggest thing that I think, though, that we've done for gun owners is given them the voice, right? Just because I'm a gun owner does not mean I should be denied the right to have access to mental health help and be judged for it, right? So we're really good with that. I like to think that before when Walk the Talk America came out in 2018, when you bought a gun, basically your mindset was, okay, I need to learn safety, right? That's the most important thing. And that's the thing that I think we all eye roll as gun owners to the outside world. Oh, you guys aren't safe. We're the safest people on the planet when it comes to firearms, right? It's drilled into our head. We watch movies and we identify every rule that's broken by the actor. Who does that? We do. But then the second thing that I think as gun owners that we learn is what to do in a defensive shooting and the legalities of it, and how you just can't shoot somebody and your world is going to be perfect. We are very aware of the consequences of actually using the firearm, which is awesome, right? But now you're seeing gun owners say, okay, there's a third element that we're going to add to this, and that is you need to have a mental health plan and a suicide prevention plan. And that's all part of being prepared and being a good gun owner. And I think that is the most, to me, that's been the funnest thing. It's the cultural shift in seeing firearms owners say that's part of gun ownership. We own that. It's ours now, right? We're not letting anyone else tell us. We'll show you how we do it. So we do that. A couple other programs that we have that I'm really proud of is that we do cultural competence courses for mental health clinicians. And we basically give healthcare providers CEUs to come through and take our course that learn about gun culture. What is the one thing that we as the gun community always complain about? No one takes the time to learn about gun culture from the outside, right? If they only hung out with us and they only took one day at the range, we could show them, right? Well, we found a way to do that. We found a way to attract mental health professionals and healthcare providers. We get a lot of just pediatricians, people that come through the course, to bring them into a space where they can learn the nuance of firearms ownership. And we've done we've had thousands of people come through and get the certificate. And the cool thing about it is we've never had one negative, comment, right? Like everyone that's come through has learned something. And many of them, will literally say, when I went into this course, I was anti-gun and now I'm gun neutral, or I got to rethink the way I look at this space. And that's all we want, right? Like
that's actually really, really impressive, because I have actually covered several instances where anti-gun people reached out to pro-gun people just so they could say, I went to a gun range, I learned how to shoot a gun, and I still don't like it. And so that is really actually amazing on the 100% success rate on that. You maybe didn't change everybody's mind, but everybody came out with a positive outlook, which is amazing.
No, I appreciate that. And I know some of the listeners are like, there has to be negative. Well, they didn't tell us, right? Like, so I'm just going by the feedback we get, because to get the CEU credits, you have to say something. Like, you can't just not say anything. So, everyone's kept it cool, but that's another thing that I'm really proud of. And it's funny, in 2018, we were the first people to ever do it. Like, it was like trailblazing. And now you're seeing these type of courses being copied by outside of gun world. But once again, we're the original, and we're from the firearms industry. So we feel like we've really, like, there's no other course like ours. Couple other things that I want to touch on. One of the things that I'm super proud of. So besides the suicide angle, right? The suicide being almost 2/3 of all firearm deaths. What is the other thing most people say? Well, it's the damn, inner city violence. So we look at that and say, like, okay, how can we approach that? How can we fix that? And I know you're probably smiling right now, because we all know nobody knows how to really fix it, right? But the way that we approach it is, let's run towards all the negative outcomes of firearms and figure out a way that we can contribute to reducing those. So we came up with a program called Kids to Kings, where we go to underprivileged, underserved communities and introduce firearms to the youth in a healthy manner. Many of these kids in these areas will never get proper guidance when it comes to firearms. They will learn about firearms through videos. They will learn about it through video games. They will learn about it from probably people that have never taken a course. And what we want to do is empower these kids to understand that Second Amendment is for them too. Don't let anybody else tell you it's not. You too can be a responsible gun owner, own guns, and also understand trauma and PTSD and all the things that go on in your community. And let's talk about it. So we take these kids and put them through a course, and our pilot program is in Atlanta right now. And like I said, it's a beautiful thing, right? You're giving people hope, because that's what people need. When I was a kid, I didn't have anybody to show me about firearms, to introduce the firearms. So I went most of my life until I was an adult and I got in the firearms industry with just that whole in the back of my mind, like, negative experience with firearms, watching it in my community. So we are doing something about it. Like, we are literally running at it. And I don't think anybody ever thought the firearms industry would be the first ones to address inner city violence. And we're doing that by root cause mitigation. We're getting to the kids while they're young. And my whole thing is let's watch some of these men grow up, to literally be instructors, things that, people say, oh, he's from Compton. Like, that would never happen. Right. Like, I love it that when I walk into a room and, once again, people say, like, what do you do? And then they bring up, like, do you have anything for the inner city youth? And we're like, yes, sir, we do. Like, let's talk about it. And what are people going to say? What is the anti-gun crowd going to say? They can't say anything, because they don't have an answer, and they don't have programs. And these are things that are going to take time. It's going to take years, but it's hard work, right? A politician only has 4 years or X amount of years to kind of tell you the BS that they need to tell you that they'll get something done. And, laws don't get things done, right? It's just hard work, boots on the ground. So that's another program. And then finally, I think one of the other biggest things, besides like the whole advocacy piece and kind of educating, consulting for different government entities and different coalitions for suicide prevention and mental health, which I do a lot, is our firearms instructor course. There's a lot of legislation coming down in many states that is requiring firearms instructors to put in an hour of suicide prevention and mental health into their curriculum. And a lot of firearms instructors were turning back around and asking the state, hey, like, you want us to do this? What do you want? And of course, the states were like birds that want to fly south that don't know why, right? It's like fly south. But what we did is we looked at that and said, okay, this stuff is coming. Why don't we? There's a lot of firearms instructors in general that aren't even being required to do this that want to address mental health, right? So why don't we put together a free course where they could just hit play and they get an hour? And we broke it up into chapters on our website, and people can go to the website there and find it. So what we do is we look for solutions. I mean, that's what we do. We look for ways to get off of the kill spot and try to do something that helps people and gets positive, good information. Because remember, everybody that's gun ignorant, there's also still a lot of ignorant people when it comes to mental health in the firearms community. So we have to educate both sides, right? And we have to be there. We have to be that resource for both sides. I need the anti-gun people or the people that are gun neutral to call me when they don't understand something. And I'll give you an example of that. I work with a lot of mental health organizations. They get asked to back certain bills. And I love the fact that they'll call Walk the Talk America to say, okay, why shouldn't I back this again? I know you explained it to me once before, but I forgot, right? And it's like, good, you're calling me and you're checking in with me. Whether you listen to me, that's a whole different story, but at least I'm getting that opportunity to educate you on why an AR ban will not do anything to reduce negative outcomes of firearms, right? And that's the most important thing to me. So on the flip side, when a gun owner calls me and they're in Wyoming or even Massachusetts, right? Like, and they're like, I need help. I want help. Like, what do I do? I'm terrified. I do not want to lose my rights, or I'm freaking out, or I went to the doctor and they asked me this. Why did they ask me this? We got to be there for the firearms owner as well. Like, we got to be there to educate them to say, don't worry, you can do this and it's not going to get you in trouble. Or yes, tread lightly. You're in the state of New York where they have the SAFE Act, which isn't so safe and it stigmatizes mental health, right? So, we do it an awful lot. It's been since 2018, and I look back and I never would have guessed that we'd have come this far, to be honest.
I mean, that is absolutely amazing. I mean, you're doing wonderful work, and I'm so glad to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Michael Sodini of Walk the Talk America. And if you guys want to check out the website or make a donation, the link will be in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And anytime, this is my world. I love this, and I love talking to other pro 2A humans that Americans that love this stuff. So.
I'm really impressed at how much he's accomplished in such a short time, and it really makes me feel like I haven't accomplished jack. Wow.
I mean, come on, Aaron. I knew you when you were nothing. You've come a long way, baby, just like Virginia Slims.
I know better than to argue with you because I won't win. But yeah. Michael, if you're listening to this, and I hope you are, if you have suggestions on how I can improve the performance of Blazing Sword, please contact me, because I've there's no roadmap for this, and I've been trying to make it up as I go along, and I don't think I'm doing a great job, and so I would love some pointers and pro tips on how to be as effective as you are. Please,
I'll give you his email. I mean, it's one of those I mentioned. I'm like, oh, just in case you didn't know, Aaron Paulette's my co-host, and he's like, oh, they'll tell Aaron I said hi.
I'm really surprised he remembers me.
Well, he did a fundraiser with Chris Chang. They've probably been talking a lot about Operation Blazing Sword Pink Pistols. Big deal, Aaron.
Entirely possible.
And I got a link to that that fundraiser. Unfortunately, we just missed it, but they did make their goal. So good on them.
Yeah, they raised a really something like well, I don't remember now, but it was definitely in the tens of thousands of dollars.
100,000.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, technically, I wasn't wrong.
No. Nope.
They raised tens of thousands of dollars.
Yep. No, it is specifically, I'm looking at it right now, $103,554.
Wow.
So they went over. Good. I love it when they go over. Here's our goal. Yeah, screw your goal.
Yeah, fantastic. Let me know how you did it, please.
Yeah. So, well, you could talk to Chris Chang because he was spearheading it.
Okay. I know Chris Chang.
Yes. and he is a lovely person, just like
our listeners.
Our listeners, each and every one of them. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate that because, yeah, it's important to have listeners, and I hope you were entertained. But I also have to give a very special thank to our supporters on Patreon. They help keep the lights on, but we're not panhandles here at ACP. We don't. We're capitalists. We're stone cold capitalists. We sell you stuff, so you get things for all this. So you get things like the ACP blooper reels, where you will hear all the stuff that I cut out of this episode that is not appropriate for the show or off topic. The ACP film tracks, where we watch wonderful movies. I just finished editing. It's going to come out in a couple weeks. We sat down and did the final countdown. I love that movie. And the ACP mag dump. At no point does that song appear in the final countdown. I know it seems like a waste that you would not have this wonderful song by the band Weer'd.
I don't even remember when the song came out, but I actually for a long time thought that it was made for that movie, and it was like played over the closing credits or something.
Yeah, it would make sense because it's it's 1986. So the movie came out in 1980. Weer'd released the song in 1986.
Why are you doing that?
That's been my favorite thing to say. My wife, since my wife works in drug regulation, she'll often talk about, we're having a meeting with Europe, and I'm like, it's pronounced Europe.
Okay.
And she rolls her eyes and then says Europe, and I win. I love being married to her. She's such a wonderful woman. I'm so irritating all the time.
Your wife is a saint.
Yeah.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
You can get more from me at my blog, which is weerdworld.com. That's weerdworld.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for this lovely music that you are listening to right now.
I'm a schmuck, and he's a putz. Our Yiddish synonyms for prick are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Mazel tov!